Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Old Erie Canal Community Working Group's annual meeting. Good to be here. And well, if you're not a presenter and you're on the Zoom link, please just have your just mute yourself, please, for now. It can get distracting, but I'm just facilitating this at this point. So I'm going to kick it over to you, Jamie, if you want to give a more description so you can let the people, especially on Facebook, know, because I think they might not fully be aware of what the Old Erie Canal is and what we do here.
Yeah, wonderful. So we like to take the opportunity at the beginning of every year to recap accomplishments from the past year and talk about the future of the Old Erie Canal Community Working Group. And it's a fantastic group comprised of municipalities, community groups, nonprofits, and a lot of volunteers. And we work very closely with New York State Canals and New York State Parks and other agencies like Parks and Trails New York to really try to advocate for the Old Erie Canal and leverage it so all of our communities can benefit from it. And so today we have three speakers. We have Dave Kellogg. He's going to kick it off for us. And for those of you who might not know Dave, but I think most everyone does, he is a wonderful volunteer for the canal. He is one of New York State Canal's Trail Ambassadors officially. He was awarded one of their highest awards in 2016.
Yep. So, you know, yeah, so
the trail work he does. And we're so glad to have Dave. He is not only a friendly face, he literally spends time, goes out on the Erie Canal Trail and greets folks as they come down the trail. You might not know it, but he's letting people know about what you have in your communities. He's answering and he's a great boots on the ground resource for us because without him, we wouldn't know about all the wonderful people, the thousands of people who are literally coming by every day on the trail through our communities. And so he's going to share some of the stories and the people that he met with this past year. And that's really going to help bring it to life, I know, for everyone. And then I will give a little bit more of a background on the group and some of the things that have been accomplished this past year, and then turn it over to Derrick Pratt, who, as he said, he's the museum educator for the Erie Canal Museum in Syracuse. And he's going to talk about updates about all the wonderful things that have been happening to complete the Erie Canal Trail in that big gap through Syracuse. And it's really exciting news. And also, thank you, Derrick, for organizing. He's been the technological person that's been putting this all together for us today. So I really appreciate that. And yeah, thank you to all of you for being here today. It's really good to see faces again. I don't think we've met, you'll learn more, but the working group used to meet once a month. I went back and we haven't met since last February. And so, if you're not part of the group all the time, just know that many of us, we haven't actually got to communicate as much. So I'm glad that the annual meeting was able to happen. With that, I'll hand it off to Dave.
Thank you, Jamie. That introduction was a bit over the top, but I certainly appreciate it. I'd also like to thank all of those people who keep the canal the wonderful resource that it is. In this year, a pandemic year, the canal was alive and well and even thriving. More people were on the Erie Canalway Trail, or towpath as we call it in this section, than in recent memory and perhaps even in decades. Parking lots at trailheads were frequently full and sometimes overflowing. I'm going to bring up the presentation at this point. Now you have something to look at while I'm talking. The following presentation is intended to show who uses the canal, how they use it, and what they think of the canal in its current state. Some of these people may simply interest you. Some may surprise you, and some may inspire you to try new or more challenging activities. So let's start with Aiden and Marie and wonder about that tiger we see on Aiden's bicycle. Aiden and Marie were a very engaging couple from Connecticut, riding end to end. Now that's canal speak for riding the whole length, 360 miles of the old historic Erie Canal. And they're doing it with this inflatable tiger. It seems that they had been watching too many COVID episodes of Tiger King. And after a while, it became living with them. And when they set out to ride the canal, they brought it with them. On the right, you can see that picture of Aiden and the tiger more clearly. And you can see that they're at Lyons. Lyons is just east of Rochester. And it was named by an early settler after Lyon in France, because in both cases, the communities had rivers that converged at the point of the village. On the left, they're standing on or by the Chittenango Aqueduct. And at the same aqueduct, we see two sisters from Canastota. They set out to hike on this very hot August day, and they weren't sure how far they were going to get. So they just started, and here they are at about the 8-mile midpoint. They were so happy, so friendly. Anyone who came by, they offered to share their lunch. And their intention was to try to get 16 miles to Manlius Center. And if you're not from the Syracuse area, let's take a look at a map. If this helps you, Canastota is the far right, out probably off your screen. Chittenango, as you can see, is that dip in the middle, and that's where the aqueduct is. And then the trail winds around, finding the flattest point, bypassing Green Lakes. And then in this case, they were able to reach Manlius Center and call to get a ride home. Okay, this is not a cow. This is a bull. He stopped me in my tracks. He lowered his head slightly and stared at me. I stared back. Then he slowly turned and walked back to his paddock. All he wanted was the lush green grass on the side of the trail. I learned later that when bulls reach an age of 2 years, they get a little ornery. So I'm sure this fellow is less than 2 years old. And this is Brad. Brad is riding to Albany, as you can see in the script there, in 3 days. Now this is 360 miles. That means he's riding 120 miles a day, 3 days in a row. And to put that in perspective, the Tour de France, probably the most famous bicycle race in the world, has days where the best riders cover about 120 miles. One of Brad's long distance rides was from Ohio to Alaska. Once he got there, he turned south to Arizona. For fun, he camps in Manitoba in wintertime. His wife and kids picked him up in Albany after they all had a chance to explore the capital city. Now, some of you may be familiar with a children's book called Flat Stanley. That's about a schoolboy who was accidentally flattened. It enabled him to fold himself up, put him in an envelope, and mail him anywhere around the world. In this case, the teacher drew a Stanley figure for each of her students and had them personalize it. Then she asked the kids to write a story about an imaginary adventure that they could take. And perhaps mail their flat selves to a person that they knew, or in this case, take it someplace, and look where flat Cody ended up on the Erie Canal. This seems to me a great idea to keep in mind for any homebound parents and kids during any shutdown period. Now, Don comes from Columbia, Missouri. He had registered and planned to ride in the annual Cycle the Erie, the New York State sponsored ride from Buffalo to Albany. But when it was canceled this year, he decided, what the heck, he'd ride it himself anyway. So he took the train to Buffalo, unpacked and packed up for the ride, and started off. After reaching Albany, he had occasion to write me with a question. I responded and said, well, you must be home by now. And he said, well, actually, no, I'm not. I had such a good time, I kept going. And now I'm cycling the high points in New Hampshire and Maine. Mary and Greg live in Port Chester, New York. That's right on the Connecticut border. They drove to Albany and then took an Amtrak train to Syracuse. Now, why would they go to Syracuse? Because last year they biked from Buffalo to Syracuse, and now they're going to finish the trip going from Syracuse to Albany. So that way they would have completed the end to end. They said to tell everyone they're having a great time and thanks for keeping the trail in good shape. So I hope if anyone in Albany is tuned in, you get the congratulatory statement there. Well, this is Liam taking his father on a 50-mile bike ride. Round trip going from DeWitt to Verona Beach. And they sent a selfie once they got to Verona Beach. Joe told me that Liam hasn't had a chance to develop his facial muscles, so he can't smile yet. That's the best he can do, but he sure looks happy at this point. This is the bridge, as you can see, over Route 481. If you're not from this area, that's a major highway that encircles part of Syracuse, and you're very happy to see the bridge begin to take shape on the left side, and then its finished appearance on the right. This is near Butternut Creek, that's in DeWitt, and it opens the route into Syracuse if you're going from east to west. This was new for me. Maybe it will be new for you. Paul and Michelle are training for the popular Camino de Santiago, a pilgrimage which dates from the Middle Ages. There are many starting points. It's sort of like a clock. You can start at any hour point. But all those routes end in Compostela, a city in the northwestern corner of Spain. The typical route begins in France and is up to 500 miles long. It's a month-long hike, or in some cases, bicycle ride. And the most recent information I could find is that there were nearly 200,000 travelers in 2012 who took part in this pilgrimage. So they think they have to hike 15 miles a day, every day for a month. And what they're doing here is practicing by walking from that Butternut Aqueduct to Canastota. Pretty much the same route that the two sisters were walking. And if you can see the note at the bottom of the screen, they were still excited when I came upon them because they saw the largest snapping turtle they had ever seen or could imagine. Ron and Gerald are two brothers in their 70s. Gerald got away before I could snap his picture. They were riding from Buffalo to Albany and then up to Tupper Lake. They spend their summers in Tupper Lake. And in the wintertime, one goes to Washington, D.C., the other goes to Florida. And how do you suppose they get there? They ride their bikes. Yvonne and Mario might win a prize, if there is one, for coming the longest distance to get to the Erie Canal. In truth, Mario came here on a 2-year work assignment with his company in East Syracuse. They were thrilled to have this opportunity to come to the States and promptly obtained an Empire State Passport. And as soon as they had done that, something else arrived, the COVID virus. And that kept them from using the Empire State Passport for a while. But here we can see they are enjoying the canal. This picture was taken by the Green Lakes Bridge. And if you look at Mario, you can see he looks like a pretty fit fellow. He rode to Rome and back one day, a ride of 75 to 80 miles. And some improvements to the canal. In Chittenango, there's a bicycle repair station. If you look carefully, you can see a bicycle pump on one side, and then inside the cylinder, every bicycle tool needed, supposedly, is attached to a cable and available for use. On the right side of your screen, you can see the new Erie Canalway Trail. This is part of Governor Cuomo's 750-mile cross-state trail system. The paved trail that we're looking at in the middle of the screen runs to Syracuse, mostly in the middle of Erie Boulevard, and then winds a little to one side and then the other side. We can see westbound and eastbound traffic on either side of the trail. I hope you can read all of the quote from Mayor. She's the young woman in the front. This is a hidden gem, she said, referring to the Erie Canal. We can't believe that our bicycle riding friends don't know of it. Mayor has a sister who lives in Buffalo, and the family decided they would visit her and set out by bike rather than by car. And they did some internet shopping while on the trail because they discovered a need for some bike gear. They were able to purchase it, get the right size, and then pick it up off the canal on their way west. They found some lodging right off the canal in Canastota, and the night of this picture was taken, they were planning to stay in Weedsport. Brian and Doug, they were the first interstate cyclists seen in 2020 on the canal. They started in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, not knowing if they would find lodging or restaurants on this trip. They rode to Albany, then headed west. Their destination is St. Louis, for heaven's sakes. On this 22-day ride, they'll see Niagara Falls and other sights, but they made a point of saying the main attraction for them was riding on the 200-year-old historic Erie Canal. They've also ridden the Great Allegheny Passage Rail Trail, which runs from Washington, D.C. to Pittsburgh. You could hear Warren and Adam coming along on the canal because they were listening to an oral history of the canal while riding along on it. They live in Brooklyn. They drove a rental car to Buffalo, unloaded their bikes on one Sunday, and headed east. When they hit Albany, they turned south, finishing at Red Hook in Brooklyn. These guys are urban planners with insight as to the care and maintenance of community resources. They wrote a thoughtful note to thank us for the Erie Canal. And then by coincidence, just 2 days ago, an email came in from Warren saying that they had enjoyed last summer so much, they want to come back this coming summer. Well, this is going to be hard to describe, Leslie and John. They're from Bloomington, Minnesota. They drove to Buffalo, picked up the Erie Canal, as you can see, and started riding, but then turned north going through the Adirondacks. Circled back south of the canal and headed home, planning a side trip to Seneca Falls. Now, John describes himself as an extreme adventurer. He hikes, bikes, paddles, and climbs, all at extreme levels. He's climbed 6 mountain peaks over 20,000 feet, 32 mountains in total. It's ironic that we would meet on what is called the long level or the big flat section of the Erie Canal. In fact, we were entered in his blog as a multi-week bike trip. We were along with other adventures, such as paddling half the Mississippi River, paddling across Manitoba from one lake to another, and several multinational, very long hikes. By coincidence, a month later, who shows up but Ken the Mountaineer? 2 mountaineers seen on the canal that have climbed some of the highest peaks in the world is quite a coincidence. We can see that Mount Denali and Kilimanjaro are included. Ken has gone on to climb all 46 peaks in the Adirondacks, and he's done it both in summertime and in wintertime. And he's climbed 111 peaks in New England. This guy just doesn't quit. We've seen people who have come from far away, maybe even exotic locations. Where does Ken come from? Ken lives in Fayetteville. If you're familiar with Bolivar Road on the canal, that's in the distance. As we look outside these days, we see a landscape of white, black, and gray. This slide reminds us what it looked like just a few months ago. So I hope you have found some interest in the people we met today and hope they have encouraged and even inspired you to take more canal adventures. Well, this concludes the slide presentation. Jamie, I'll turn this back to you.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks, Dave. It's so great to have Dave set the stage and be the first presentation, because it really just helps to demonstrate all the different people out on the trail, coming through our communities, coming from all different places, using the canal in different ways, taking on little segments, doing the whole thing, riding with friends, riding with families, coming alone. There's just so many people and it's just so important to have someone like Dave capture those stories and share them with us, because unlike a lot of trails or parks or resources, we don't have a central entry point. So it's really hard for us to count and capture all the people that are coming here for the trail. And then they're stopping, like Dave said, and staying over for lodging, and they're shopping while they're out biking for things that they need, and they're listening to the history as they're going along. They're coming here for the canal, and then they're staying and seeing things that our communities have to offer. And it's just really hard to bring that to life without someone like Dave out on the trail capturing these stories. So thank you, Dave. And then with that, I have to put up my presentation, see if I can do that. Can everyone see that? Okay, I got the thumbs up. Okay, so as I said, the Old Erie Canal Working Group is one that has been in existence since 2014, and we're comprised of, municipal leaders, people like Dave, wonderful people like Dave, and then community groups, nonprofits, museums, like where Derrick Pratt is from. So, but one thing that I think helps, before I dive right into what the group has been doing and what the group has accomplished this past year, is just to give a little bit of background and context, because I really think it helps show the significance and makes it more relevant. And one of the best resources that was recently shared with me is this website, which I show the link below, that just tries to capture the different eras of the Erie Canal, if you will. So, the first, shovel on the ground in 1817 made the Erie Canal. It was enlarged in 1862. And then as technologies, engineering got more advanced, we ended up with the barge canal in 1917 that really took advantage of lakes and rivers to move more efficiently. But so what you're seeing on this map is the red line is the older canal, and the blue line is the enlarged barge, or is the barge canal. So the red line is the old canal, the blue line is the barge canal. And what I'm really trying to show with this and convey to everyone is, if you notice, for most of the state, the two are the same and they overlap. And so as the canal has evolved, the communities got to evolve with it. But in central New York, you'll notice that they're very much separate. So the canal that we have running through, the canal that you see when you stand at the Chittenango Landing Boat Museum, and the canal that you see standing in downtown Canastota in Oneida, that is the old canal. And the barge canal, bypassed us, and it's up through Oneida Lake. And that's such a significant part of our story, and it makes us so unique in central New York. And one of the reasons why I think our group exists, and one of the things that we're working around, it just makes us very different from other canal communities in New York. So I wanted to share that. And when we think about the focus of the Old Erie Canal Community Working Group, the main focus is this area in blue, and that represents the visible parts of the Old Erie Canal that still exist in central New York. We have great partners outside of these boundaries, like obviously in Syracuse and also in Camillus, but the main focus is this blue area here. And so as you can see, it's a pretty big area. It's 36 miles, 3 counties, 2 cities of Rome and Oneida, 4 villages and 5 towns. And this footprint is also, so this blue footprint is also the same footprint of the Old Erie Canal State Historic Park. Because another very unique thing for us is our Erie Canal is also a state park. So when you're in other parts of the state on the canal, it's not also a state park. And so that's just a tremendous asset for us, and just this nice additional layer for our communities and what the trail and park place is. And there's basically two things that you should think about when you think about the Old Erie Canal corridor. That's the trail and the waterway. And the trail and the parkland itself is maintained by New York State Parks. Brent McPherson, the park manager for the Old Erie Canal State Historic Park, is on the call today. Thanks, Brent. And his office is actually physically located in the park. And that's a tremendous thing for us. And they're always out on the trail. They've done so many things, great partners on all of this. And what I want to highlight about the trail and the park is that with the trail and the park, we are directly connected to the rest of the state through the Empire State Trail. So that trail that you're standing on in Chittenango, I mean, it goes, and Derrick's going to elaborate more on how it's been completed, but it goes all the way to Buffalo. It ties us directly to, it's a small graphic in the bottom left-hand side, but Buffalo to Albany, that's the Erie Canalway Trail, and then the north-south is the Hudson Valley Greenway Trail. And those trail systems combined are the state's new Empire State Trail. And right in the middle there is us. And that's this picture taken over here is just outside of Chittenango. That's that same trail. And it's just amazing that millions of people, world-renowned, Erie Canal Trail are coming. And every time they come through Central New York, they're coming through right on this trail, right through our communities. And so from the trail and from the Empire State Trail Initiative, we've seen new investments in 2020. I just wanted to highlight, there's been other things, but new trailheads. The top right picture is a new trailhead that was done at BB Bridge Road in the town of Lenox. And then the bottom left one it's before it was finished and not the prettiest day, but is the new trailhead for the Empire State Trail along our corridor and stretch at Lakeport Road. So those are some new investments that have happened with the Empire State Trail Initiative, overlapping with our stretch of the Erie Canal Trail and the Old Erie Canal State Historic Park. So then obviously the other feature, why all of this is here, is the waterway itself. And the Old Erie Canal waterway followed that same blue line I showed you earlier, but the waterway is maintained by New York State Canals. And they're also a partner with us. They don't have a physical office in our section of the canal, but their two divisions maintain the Old Erie Canal from the western and eastern side, with the middle point being about Canastota. But the thing that I want to kind of convey in this slide is that, going back to that first slide I showed you, is that unlike the trail system, we're less connected to the state, because again, the barge canal goes north of us. So that's something that we have to keep in mind and remember and preserve the historic. This is the longest intact portion of the old canal. So preserving that, telling that story, realizing that we are unique. So saying all of that, one thing that is really interesting to me that probably many of you do know, while we are separate, there is a spot where the Old Erie Canal intersects with the barge canal, and that's in the town of Verona near the hamlet of New London. And it's a really small, like just a Google picture on the bottom left corridor, but you can see the Old Erie Canal coming in from the west and heading east into that bigger blue line. That's the barge canal. And originally, when they built the barge canal, the Old Erie Canal was meant to feed water to the barge canal system. And so there is this really interesting interconnection point between the barge and the Old Erie. But for the most part, like I said, we're not part of that barge canal system. And then just a little aside, seeing that Google map, has everyone noticed that when you look at the Erie Canal on Google, it always says Poolsbrook? If anybody could fix that, they'll be in the 22 presentation. I'll make a big slide about them being able to rectify that. I've submitted it to Google a few times and just can't get that changed. It's so confusing. You zoom in, they should say Erie Canal, but it says Poolsbrook. And so with the waterway, we realize there are challenges. It is a 200-year-old asset at this point. And it's really going to take all of us to have a long-term vision and maintenance plan for it. And so these two photos were taken in the exact same spot of the Old Erie Canal. And it's really easy to know that just because of the power lines in the background. And so this was in Verona. And I think one of the things it says to me is that all of us need to care about what's happening in Verona, because we're all connected. This is all one system. One of the things I could have said on the previous slide about the waterway is that if you haven't spent much time in a kayak on the water, you might not realize that the water is still all connected. So the Old Erie Canal waterway, I'll just back up a slide. It starts in DeWitt here. It weaves its way past Fayetteville, past Chittenango, through Canastota, and then north through Oneida up to Verona. And while it's doing that, it goes under a railroad, it goes under Peterborough Street in Canastota, it even goes under the thruway in Oneida. And you might not always be able to tell, but it's all connected. If you were in a boat, you could go through there. You'd have to get out at Peterborough Street and hop over on the other side. But my point is the water is all connected, and we're all connected to this one system and to each other. And so, if in 25 years this has happened to the section in Verona, what does that mean for Canastota and Chittenango? So we all need to be thinking about the system as one system, and working on the challenges together. Dave said it best. The reason why we're here is because of all these people who are coming, and they're doing all different types of activities. Dave captures individual stories, but we've also worked with Parks and Trails New York to do trail counts. They actually have a trail counter in Canastota along part of the trail right now, to actually count real people as they're using the trail every day. We have the registers at the Chittenango Landing Canal Boat Museum to tell us where people are coming from, and they're coming from all over. And the impact, as we said, translates into dollars and cents, tourism and economic development for our communities. And that's what the Old Erie Canal Community Working Group is about. It's about supporting our communities to leverage this asset, everything from events to connecting trails to kind of just branding around the canal and using its character. And our communities are all working on different aspects of this, and the working group exists to try to help support some of that and link it together. And I think we've been pretty successful about bringing new awareness to the Old Erie Canal specifically, and educating ourselves about the resource so that we can be a better advocate for it and working together. So this isn't even a comprehensive list, but these are some of the groups that have been involved with the Old Erie Canal Working Group. And since 2014, as I mentioned, we had always met the last Thursday of every month in person, mostly at the Chittenango Landing Boat Museum. And the group is open to anyone that wants to participate. Things are not quite on a regular schedule as they used to be, but just, the takeaway is that the group is open to anyone with an interest in the Erie Canal. These are our 4 main goals that I'm going to go into a little bit more detail and show some things in 2020 that we were able to accomplish. Before I do, I just didn't want to forget to let everyone know that we do have a website, tourthetowpath.com, and a Facebook page that hopefully you all follow or are aware of. So I mentioned there were 4 goals. So one of the goals that we've been working on for a number of years is reconnecting and revitalizing the Old Erie Canal waterway. And at our annual presentation last year, I think most of you, or many of you attended. Our guest speaker was John Warnley from the USGS. He's a hydrologist, and the USGS did a study of the Old Erie Canal waterway, looking at all kinds of water quality data to reestablish a baseline understanding of what the water is doing in the Old Erie Canal, because it's been a number of years since anyone has looked, scientifically at the whole system comprehensively. And of course, all of those things are very interesting, but I think for this group, the most interesting thing was they also looked at the infrastructure and they looked at the flow. And what they found is, so the Old Erie Canal, it's a man-made, hand-dug structure. And so to supply water to it, there were 3 water sources: Butternut Creek, Limestone Creek, and Chittenango Creek. And by looking at this, they found that actually no water is coming into the system from those 3 original sources. And so that was very telling to us. And then they also, just looking at water depth, I think any of us who have been out on the canal can see that there are these 3 character areas as you move from west to east. There just starts to be less water. But they were able to actually document that the average depth of water from DeWitt to Durhamville is 3.5 feet, versus you move east of there and there's significantly less. And so this, again, there's some things that we were all able to observe, but having the USGS go out and actually record this information and put it together for us is going to be a huge springboard into future actions. And so, as I said, John shared the results of those studies at the last annual meeting, but it's very much something that's still in motion and that we continue to use and work with. Another way to connect to the waterway was our Old Erie Canal boat float event. And we hosted this event. It brought out hundreds of people, and it just shows the popularity of the Old Erie Canal for kayaking. And while we weren't able to do the event in 2020, we're really hoping to do something. And so hopefully stay tuned for that. One of the greatest things that we just really want to tout for 2020 was the Old Erie Canal was selected to be one of 6 New York State canal staycations. And this was a really great program put together by New York State Canals and a variety of state agencies. And to promote people getting outside and seeing things in New York during COVID. You know, people embraced being outside. And so this message really was, go and see the places that you live. And we're so happy that the Old Erie Canal was selected as one of the places for these staycations. They created a website. There was numerous press releases about it. It really promoted people to come to Central New York, come on the canal, and they promoted businesses in Chittenango and in Canastota. And you know, another wonderful thing was they actually, through the program, purchased kayaks and bikes for the Chittenango Landing Canal Boat Museum that now the boat museum still has. And they, especially the kayaks, were rented out. They couldn't even hardly keep up with it. It was just a really popular thing, and it was great to be a part of that. So, and I don't know how much credit we can take, but I actually do think it's a reflection of all of us working to bring more awareness to the Old Erie Canal. Because when we know more about our resource and we can share it with others, then they're able to promote it for us. Because before this program was launched, I got several phone calls from New York State Canals and the consultant working with them. What is there to do? We need to have, you know, so they need to have the information. And so I think we were able to provide that, and then they were able to package it really nicely for us. Another really wonderful 2020 accomplishment was we worked with the city of Oneida to submit an Erie Canalway National Heritage Corridor grant, and they were selected and got $12,000 to make new interpretive signs. Right now, if you were to go on the Erie Canal Trail, traveling west to east, so if you started in DeWitt, there are these really wonderful, 2x3 interpretive signs in the ground, and they go to about Canastota, but then they end. And they describe and bring to life all these historical aspects of the canal that you really couldn't see unless they were there. And so this grant that we received was hoping to do that in Oneida. And so 5 new interpretive signs are going to go in, and I wanted to just spend a little bit of time talking about those. This has really been led, like I said, at the City of Oneida by Patty Meekin in their Parks and Rec department, and she put together the A team for this. We had the county historian, we had a rail historian, John Taby, we had the Madison County Historical Society working with us. So she had this great team, and the grant is allowing us to hire a sign company to design the signs, which you're looking at one of them right now, and then ultimately to fabricate them. And New York State Parks shows a great partnership. New York State Parks is going to install some of the signs, and the City of Oneida will install some of the other ones. But in total, there are 5, and the one you're looking at right now is going to be 7.5 feet by 4 feet, so it's a very big sign, and it's going right in downtown Oneida in this kiosk you see on the left. And it's a wonderful intersection point because the City of Oneida has been working on the Oneida Rail Trail for a number of years, and that trail connects into the Erie Canal Trail. And this is where the two kind of intersect. And this kiosk has been built as part of the Oneida Rail Trail project, but it's going to house information about not only the 3 railroads that went through Oneida and made it what it was today, but also the Erie Canal. And like I said, right now, there's no interpretive signs about the Erie Canal in Oneida. And this project really is about reconnecting Oneida to some of that history to springboard into some new projects for them. And so I think, I could highlight a lot of things about the kiosk, but I think one of the great things is this timeline on the bottom, and it really brings you through how, from when the Erie Canal was first built in 1817, how it changed Oneida over the next 200 years. The other 4 signs are going to be smaller. They're 2 by 3 feet. And 3 of the signs are going in the city of Oneida, and 2 of them are going right on the trail. So this is another sign that's going in Oneida, and it's highlighting the Oneida feeder. And again, all this work that you're seeing on the sign was done by local historians, put together. We looked through so many pictures. I learned so many things by being part of this project. And then we gave that information to the designer, and then they created these signs. And the city is just, they're very close to putting them out for fabrication, and then they should be installed this spring. But yeah, the Oneida feeder that ran right through downtown Oneida, it was constructed in 1835, and I never knew, but it was for the old Oneida Lake Canal that used to be in existence between Higginsville and Oneida Lake. And while this feeder does not exist anymore, it was filled in, there are still some remnants of it. And that's where this sign is going to be located, actually, at a place on the bottom left. This is right along Main Street in Oneida. You see that that series of steps. That's the same steps, or the location, maybe not the exact same steps, they probably have been redone, of where you see one of the footbridges that used to cross the feeder. And so, so that'll be the location of this sign, really bringing to life what the feeder used to be to downtown Oneida. And then Oneida has a 3rd sign that is going to focus on the growth of Oneida over the years during the era of the Erie Canal, and that'll be placed in Higginbottom Park, which is a park in their downtown. And then the last 2 signs are going directly right on the Erie Canal Trail. This one highlights the aqueducts that are in Oneida. There's 2 aqueducts in Oneida, which is really kind of amazing because there's only 34 aqueducts, I think, total throughout the whole system and the whole state. And 5 of them are in the Old Erie Canal State Historic Park, and 2 of them are in Oneida. And then the 5th sign is about this very popular dry dock location that's in present day Oneida. And you can see on the left, these 2, well, these are the 2 dry docks for the Dorns Dry Dock. It was about 22 acres. They had a blacksmith, they had an ice house. I mean, they were building and repairing boats. It was a very active place up until about 1924. And so this sign is going to help bring that to life, because when you're out on the trail, you're standing right there, but you wouldn't know it. And now with these signs, you will. And again, we're excited for what it means for visitors passing through, for them to learn more, but we're also excited for what it means for Oneida, because they're retapping into this history, reconnecting themselves as a canal community. And I think that's really going to be a great like future step for them. It's going to springboard them into other things. Another goal, overall goal for all of these things, is just increasing coordination amongst ourselves, again, to create a system-wide vision and maintenance plan. You know, we've talked about the popularity of kayaking, but to truly, right now, there's not really an official water trail on the Old Erie Canal. And to make that happen, we're all going to have to work together to make launches and amenities and, you know, spread the word about how it works and where people can launch from. So again, working together to make that happen. The picture on the bottom right, you know, shows, I went out with DOT and looked at a couple of the bridges that they have over the canal. And as I mentioned, you can get in a kayak and start in DeWitt, and you never have to get out until you hit Canastota at Peterborough Street. So you'd have to get out and portage there. But if you portage there and got back in, you could go all the way to this point here. And we've been talking with DOT about what that means if in the future they could replace this culvert with a box, more of a bridge box culvert that people could get through. And it is something they're looking into. And this is in Verona. So again, Verona needs to be aware of the canal resource, like all the communities, so that when things happen, such as DOT is going to replace bridges, they can help advocate for this type of thing. And then the top pictures are just showing that anytime, you know, we're doing maintenance or things to our section of the canal, just keeping in mind, you know, the impact of people throughout the rest of the system. So I think, in our last annual presentation, we shared one of the great accomplishments of finishing our community wayfinding signs, which is one of the pictures in the bottom left is of one of the community wayfinding signs. This is the one in Oneida. But what I wanted to highlight for 2020 is New York State Parks. Brent McPherson and his staff have been installing these gateway signs, and they've been going in throughout this year at all the places that the trail intersects with roadways. And so I love that they're dual-sided. So if you were, again, this is a place, let's see, this is BB Bridge. Yeah, BB Bridge Road. So this is where the road is intersecting the trail. And so if you're on the road, you're greeted by this sign that says, this is the Old Erie Canal State Historic Park. But now if on the right, you'll see if you're coming up the trail, the back side is letting you know what the road name is that you're intersecting, and it's giving you information about when the next crossing is. So those are going in this year. And it's a great partnership. We helped get the grant funding to do the signs, and State Parks is installing them. Another way that the working group, we try to assist communities with their connecting trail systems. I mentioned the one in Oneida, but almost all of our communities have some kind of connecting trail system that the Erie Canal is, the backbone. And then all the communities have these community trails that they're using to connect people to and from the Erie Canal Trail. And with that vast trail network that we are developing and working all on together, one of the coordinated events that we had always put on was Tour of the Towpath. And we've done that for 5 years, and we've had up to 150 people each summer come out and ride on the Old Erie Canal. Again, it wasn't something we were able to do in 2020, but I wanted to just make sure it was still in here. So, and kind of a culmination of all these more short-term efforts is a longer-term effort that we've been working on for a number of years, and that's to create a vision for the entire 36-mile Old Erie Canal, a land and water use plan. And, we've done numerous public meetings. We've engaged with all the communities. This plan is coming together. Inventory sections have been drafted for most of our communities. Verona, Oneida, Chittenango have all been given theirs, and the other communities will be getting their drafted sections soon. And we'll also be reaching out to the community again. We're just starting to work on a community survey as part of this planning effort. And I just can't stress the importance enough of right now, we don't have anything, tangible in our hands that all of us can look to and use. All the communities are kind of doing their own thing, and that works. And we're trying to coordinate through the working group. But hopefully, if through this plan, if we can really solidify it, we'll be stronger together. And that's what this plan will hopefully do, and keep going for a while. And then I just want to conclude with talking about updates about Reimagine the Canals. As many of you know, we had the tremendous honor in 2018 of being selected as the winning proposal to the New York State Canals Reimagine the Canals competition. And, the idea put forward got a lot of attention and momentum behind it. And it was to create a new lifestyle corridor on the canal. And we've been calling it a canal side pocket neighborhood. One thing I wanted to just, briefly touch on is to say that the idea for, pocket neighborhoods along the canal is somewhat of a new combination, but pocket neighborhoods are being done successfully throughout the country. And we're hoping to bring that, configuration that is being sought after by young professionals and retirees and people looking for community to the canal, to kind of combine both, the great layout of a pocket neighborhood with all of the out your front door recreation that the Erie Canal has to offer. And we were selected to demonstrate this project, and we were given $1.5 million to bring this project to life. And this is a rendering of what it could look like. And there's lots of things I could say about this project, but I just want to highlight what was done in 2020 right now. And that was, we did acquire a site earlier this year for the Pocket Neighborhood. And it's a 2.5 acre site, a stone's throw away from the main street of Canastota. It has 250 feet of frontage on the Erie Canal, and it's pretty much just a vacant site right now. And we're hoping to have about 45 new housing units on the site to bring new foot traffic to downtown Canastota, bring new people to our upstate canal communities. And this is going to be the pilot that hopefully can be something that other canal communities can learn from. So in addition to acquiring this site, we also put together a selection committee and released a request for qualification to developers, because the purpose of this project is to be a public-private partnership. And we had 3 wonderful developers come forward that wanted to work with us on this project. And we're very close to releasing publicly who the selected developer is. And so that's a huge step forward, and hoping to make more strides on that project in 2021. And we did create a website where you can follow the project at canalsidecanastota.com. So with that, I'll conclude. It was definitely a different year. We weren't meeting as often, but things were still definitely going on in the background. And I hope that, I'm so glad to see so many of you back for the annual meeting. I'm glad you're still so passionate, and of course you would be. But so please reach out to me anytime with questions or things about the canal. We will continue to do work in 2021. So thank you. And then I'll turn it over to Derrick right now for the final presentation, and maybe to see if there are any questions or anything for the end. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Derrick Pratt, the museum educator with the Erie Canal Museum.
Great, thanks, Jamie. Exciting stuff happening on the whole Old Erie Canal, and exciting stuff on the extension, I'd like to think, of the Old Erie Canal here in Syracuse, because this part of the trail picks up where the Old Erie Canal Trail leaves off, right in DeWitt by Butternut Creek. So now I'm going to talk about the Empire State Trail in Syracuse. Jamie already talked a little about the Empire State Trail, 500 plus miles of trail going from Buffalo all the way to Albany, and then from there up to the Canadian border and down to New York City. And I think there might even be more plans to extend it in the future, but I'm not gonna officially say that. Whoops, that was the wrong app I opened up on my phone. So the governor announced this plan 2019, and here we are in 2020, and it's complete. And right now I want to focus on this spot here. All of us here or many of us in the Old Erie Canal Community Working Group, very well aware of this problem, the gap that was in Syracuse, New York. Here is a map of the new trail that was shared with me from Canal Corporation by Sasha Eisenstein, where you can see all the route here over on the right side. That's where the Old Erie Canal Trail ends in DeWitt. As you can see, it goes all the way right through downtown Syracuse, hooks up the Onondaga Lake Trail, as well as the Onondaga Creek Walk, and goes through the fairgrounds even, and it'll take you right to the Camillus Aqueduct. And there you can go all the way to Rochester pretty much along the trail, no problem. So we'll look at some of the things that went on. Dave already luckily showed us the picture of the new pedestrian and cycling bridge over 481. That was one of the first things installed this year as part of this new effort. Then in Hanover Square, it must have happened when no one was coming into work here at the Erie Canal Museum during that part of the year, because no one saw work being done in Hanover Square. But this lovely bike path now passes right through the heart of downtown Syracuse, right along Water Street here. This was when I got interviewed with Brandon Roth. Also, you'll notice I'm wearing my Canalway Challenge bandana thing. Gators, that's it. I've forgotten because I stopped wearing them when they started doing more surveys on good face masks. But it was a great giveaway. Yeah, so that was exciting. A lot of people I know were logging miles on the Canalway Challenge, and a lot of people were coming through Syracuse. And that is going to be even better. They're going to see the incredible architecture that is in downtown Syracuse. But the real highlight of this year, I remember when I first started getting involved in canal stuff in 2017. I was at Chittenango Landing. No, was it 2016? I don't know. Time doesn't mean anything anymore. It's the 2020s. But anyway, this was what I remember we were seeing, and everyone back then couldn't even picture really this route going down the middle of Erie Boulevard. Some people could, like Sam Gordon and all the other great people who got us to this point. But the bike path going down through the middle of Erie Boulevard, and Dave already showed us a picture of what that looks like, and it's incredible. A few highlights from the construction process. We got contacted at one point by a construction worker here at the Canal Museum out near Beach Street. These right here, they were doing some work on I think sewage or something had to be rearranged, some kind of water system. And they uncovered the remains partially of the Lodi locks over by Beach Street, which was incredible to see that. Me and our communications director, who most of you folks know, she's now retired, Vicki Kresak, we both got to go see this incredible find under Erie Boulevard. If you'll notice, it's maybe a foot and a half right under the pavement is this old canal infrastructure. Here's a nice picture of the trail now, and here, this is courtesy of Central New York DOT, this photo. These are all the trees that were planted alongside Erie Boulevard and the trail. So it's going to be an incredible looking trail. Syracuse back in the 1800s used to be famed for its tree-lined streets. A city planner back in the early 1800s had done that. They got torn out because people thought we looked like a hick town in the early 1900s. But now the tree-lined back streets are back in Syracuse, at least partially, with these new trees that are planted all along the route. And as you can see in this picture, there are even stoplights for bicycles all along Erie Boulevard, which those will be very helpful for passing through. And then the other big thing was the bridge. If you've ever been on our Tuesdays on the Towpath rides over the years, you know that they always used to stop right past the Inner Harbor when you couldn't pass over to the other side of the Onondaga Lake outlet. But now these bridges span that gap, and this is where you can hook up to the, what is it called? Onondaga Lake trails. And here's a photo from the ribbon cutting, which was just earlier this month. So real exciting stuff there. And now we look to the future, and this is going to give so many new possibilities here on the canal. I met a few of the people that were in Dave's presentation. They ended up at the Canal Museum, generally lost, which is where we get a lot of people riding bikes on the Canalway Trail, end up here, not really knowing where they are. That, I believe, will be far less of an issue in the future, but they're going to go right by us where this gentleman is riding his bike on Water Street. And it's going to be so much, this new Empire State Trail is going to really connect the two sides of Syracuse together and connect Syracuse to the Old Erie Canal much better. And we're going to work on improving our programming to take advantage of that. Here we have from the before times with the pandemic, walking tour we had in downtown Clinton Square. Again, the trail goes right through this gorgeous area, and hopefully we'll be able to take advantage of this new trail with programming like Tuesdays on the Towpath, Cycle to Erie, Tour of the Towpath. We can get all sorts of, there's tons of stuff like the staycation program. The sky's the limit, really, I think now with the Empire State Trail. Yeah, I actually, during Dave's presentation, I thought about how we have the term end-to-ender. There's going to have to be a new term for people who do the whole Empire State Trail, but who knows? But anyway, that's most of my presentation here. Yeah, and the trail is done. Like, we have a complete pedestrian cycling trail all the way through New York, which is exciting. So that was it. Not a long presentation, just giving you folks an update.
Wonderful. Thanks, Derrick. I know it's been such a long time coming and such a grand vision that I actually, besides seeing your pictures and Dave's pictures, it's so recently finished. I haven't even seen it in person yet, and I can't wait to get out there. It's just hard to believe that it's done. It's all connected. It's going to be fantastic. I can't wait for everyone to be able to go visit it. And like you said, it just opens up all these new potential opportunities to collaborate and do more things. Some people might recall it was 2 or 3 years ago, we did a tour of the towpath ride, and we actually took people, once they ended in DeWitt on our trail, we took people through Syracuse on what would eventually be the off-road path. And we planned for it, and we planned for how hard it would be, but just to imagine that it's all done now and that people don't have to do that anymore, it's just fantastic. And so that does conclude all of our presentations. If anybody does, want to add anything or have a very specific question, feel free to unmute and ask. Otherwise, we're also all available anytime too. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for joining everyone for our annual meeting this year. First time virtual. I think it went pretty well. Thanks, Derrick, for getting it all together.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, hope to talk with you all soon. Have a good night.